2, 1. Hello?
Good morning. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to our show each week, and I appreciate all our callers and audience. This show is sponsored by our law firm, Lee, Counsel, Crowley. February 1st, be Lee, Counsel, and Feigley, LLP. And we also be relocating our firm shortly. But this week, we also have our superstar panel, Attorney Milton, LA, famous lawyer representing Rodney King, and our master tax expert, cybersecurity expert, Attorney Vanita Banks. We start off today with an update on a mass killing in Lake County, Illinois, where Robert Crimo last summer had tried to shoot everybody in town during the 4th of July parade. And it was he was indicted on, I think, 177 charges. I'm giving you a quick update on that to give you an idea of what's going on in the case. The state sent them over 2,500 pages of written discovery, 2,500 pages. It included videos, photograph, audio recording. So you had all sort of video surveillance. The suspect, after he allegedly did all these mass killings, he disguised as a woman and put on makeup. And of course, they got video surveillance showing what he's doing apparently. And so I think that Illinois took the death penalty out of the equation. So that trial has not been set yet, no trial date on that case. And looks like it may be set for trial probably in 2024, the way things are going with because they don't have a scheduling order on the case yet. But he had a Smith & Wesson and a 15 semi-automatic rifle when he allegedly engaged in all these mass shootings. But we have a lot of issues today. Just want to update you on that because he had indictment was 117 charges, but he had 21 counts of murder in the first degree. 21 counts of murder in the first degree. A lot of victims, a lot of injured people, a lot of lost lives, a lot of dreams shattered, a lot of injuries. Such a terrible ordeal. And but in any event, Attorney Banks, in response to these mass killing, they're not mass shooting in my mind, they're just mass killing. Do you have any special legislation for gun control that have been enacted in your state?
Yes, and good morning, Attorney Lee. In the wake of the horrific mass killings that you just described on last Labor Day in Highland Park, Illinois, the Protect Illinois Communities Act was introduced in the Illinois legislature, and recently, within the last 2 weeks or so, was signed into law by Governor Pritzker. And several lawsuits have been filed since that time in the last 2 weeks, challenging that law, which is an assault weapon ban prohibiting the delivery, sale, manufacture, and purchase of assault weapons in the state of Illinois. Now, existing assault weapon owners, they may retain their weapons, but they must be registered with the Illinois State Police. And the law will prohibit rifles to 10 rounds and handguns to 15 rounds. And roughly a week or so ago, a lawsuit was filed in downstate Illinois. And just yesterday, Illinois Judge Morrison granted a motion for a temporary restraining order on virtually procedural grounds that the law was passed without strict scrutiny of whether there were least restrictive burdens on constitutionally protected rights. And that was his ruling just yesterday. And this temporary restraining order, Attorney Lee and Grimes, applies only to those approximately 850 plaintiffs that are named in this lawsuit. And so meanwhile, another lawsuit has been filed by the Illinois Rifle Association alleging that the law is unconstitutional based on the Second Amendment because it violates the Second Amendment. And with respect to the TRO, our Illinois Attorney General, Kwame Raoul, he's filed a motion and a notice of appeal to reverse and vacate the temporary restraining order.
Wow, lots of litigation. So it doesn't look like that this law is going to be settled anytime soon, because when they have this type of litigation, they get millions of dollars from the NRA and these Second Amendment groups. And the thing that always concerns me is that they confuse weapons of mass destruction with the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. And so the weapons that we're looking at are weapons that should be used in defense of your country, such as in Ukraine, in the Russian invasion. But why would we think that we need those type of weapons on our city streets? The only purpose of these weapons is mass killing. You're not going to go out and shoot at a rabbit with a gun that shoots 150 bullets. So even if you did use that for hunting, you're probably going to be hitting targets that you have no business hitting in the first place. So that's my take on it. But Attorney Grimes, you're on mute. Yeah, you're on mute. Hey, Milton, you're on mute. Well, wait a second. Well, you can't. I'll wait until we get the technical difficulty fixed with Attorney Grimes. Okay, this time we'll take one of the callers, producers. I think Reverend Phillips, you have a question or comment for us today, Reverend?
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Reverend Phillips, what's your question?
Yeah, Nathaniel Lee, Brother Nathaniel Lee. I believe I was watching all these bills they were passing. I believe some of our listeners does not understand these bills being passed is some of the stuff some of the people, some of the community, they tired of all this, these calls on people, like picking with people, asking them for help, but boil down to it, these people don't want help. And it sounds like that when the people pass these bills, they letting some people know.
Hello?
Okay.
Hey, this is...
Okay, Milton, go ahead with your comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. You know, we've been discussing these gun laws and gun issues every time a major shooting come up for a number of years now, and it doesn't seem as though we've gotten very far. Does it, Ms. Banks?
That's absolutely right, Attorney Grimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's too much money at stake, Mr. Lee, and too many of our politicians and representatives, I guess, are influenced by the lobbying of the gun control and the money they're getting from it. I don't know what we're going to do with this national problem. We could talk about it all day, but I don't have the confidence that anything real serious is going to happen with the sales of guns overall. Now, we may limit people on these assault weapons to they can have 10 rounds. I don't know what you need 10 rounds for unless you are in combat defending this country. It's just never ending conversation, but it doesn't seem like much is being done, no matter how many mass shootings we have.
That's terrible. Hey, Pierre, you have a question or comment for us, sir?
Yeah, can you hear me good, Nate?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good morning to all of you attorneys. I wanted to just bring up something that happened in Attorney Grimes' city. A couple of days ago, some activists and Black Lives Matter had a news conference on the killing of Mr. Keenan Anderson. And, you know, Attorney Grimes, we had a situation here with a man that was tased and subsequently died of cardiac arrest. So those tasers might, they might have to look at those. But at any rate, the activists downtown LA, they held a rally. And at the end of the news conference, Nate, this white lady who goes around and latches on to Black issues and everything and out there in LA, she's really a nobody. She instigated a confrontation with the Black Lives Matter leaders, Patrice Cullors and Miss Abdullah out there. And the photographers for the LA Times took a picture, and they had the family and everything. But when the LA Times did the story, they ran that picture of the white lady confronting the Black Lives Matter people. My point is, that was low down of the LA Times. And I just wanted to let Attorney Grimes know I saw that. I'm sitting in Indianapolis. I read a lot of newspapers, but I saw that and it was low down. And we had the same type of situation here with the man getting tased. But, you know, Nate, that's the type of low down, dirty journalism that goes on against the Black community, and it needs to be called out because I think there was a pro-police move by the LA Times. And I just want to let Attorney Grimes know that I saw that, and probably a lot of people saw that. I just wanted to bring that up this morning.
I didn't see that particular picture, Pierre, but it doesn't surprise me. And it doesn't, the issue that I like to address, though, that's in what your statement is, not only does the LA Times have a biased view, but the police department used tasing as if it's a fruit being given to a person or something. I have a case where a young man called the police because he caught a burglar in his home last year. He called the police, told him what clothing he was wearing. Let's say he was wearing all white and the burglar was wearing all black, and he had apprehended this burglar and he had a knife holding this burglar at bay. The police arrived, they saw him as he described in his home, and they told him to drop the knife. He said, the guy is lying right here in front of me. I don't want to drop the knife next to him. And this is all on the body cam. And they dropped the knife. He dropped the knife. They shoot him with the taser. This is a young African-American man in his own home. They shoot him with the taser 3 times for no apparent reason. He didn't have a weapon and he wasn't making a threat. They will shoot you like that with these tasers as if they are harmless. I don't know if it's a lack of training or just a bad attitude. I think it's both, but they use the tasers as if they are just a smack in the face. And the tasers can be a deadly weapon when you overuse it. That's our main problem.
That's terrible.
Well,
And,
yeah, Mr. Whitfield, we had that case here in Indianapolis, and they can tell you about that. Well, thank you for taking my call.
okay. Imhotep, you have a question or comment for us today, sir?
Hello. Can you hear me, Nate?
Yeah, okay. Also, let me make one up. For our other callers, if you want to participate, our number is 833-653-3529. 833-653-3529. You could also join us on YouTube also, so make sure you sign up for YouTube also. But go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. Hello to your guests. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things that we just had the Supreme Court refuse to hear the oral arguments in state rifle and pistol versus City of New York. The gun dealers were trying to challenge New York's new gun restrictions, public areas. I guess they're getting a log of how much ammunition is being bought and things like that. And SCOTUS refused to hear it, which angered the plaintiffs, of course. And I was wondering how in Illinois that may transcend, or how that may affect the case, Attorney Banks, when you get a chance. And then number 2, we saw with the African AP history being rejected in Florida. I just pulled up the case, Purnell versus Florida Board of Governors, which on November 17th of just last year, the federal judge blocked the Stop Woke Act and said it stopped the injunction from it being enforced in higher education context. So I was wondering, maybe this is from the ACLU's page. I wonder if the ACLU may fight and use this in defense of what just happened in Florida with them stopping AP African American Studies. It's awful funny when I went and looked at all the classes that Florida offers, and I have 2 adult children and 9 grandchildren that live there. They offer Japanese culture, European culture, Mexican culture, Asian American culture, Italian culture, but they don't want African American. It's just befuddling to me. But I'm hoping that what happened with the November 17th decision from the federal judge blocking the Woke Act on higher education, maybe they can go and attack that from that means. And then lastly, with the tasers, it's just Attorney Grimes talked about. He thinks it's a problem with both. I think you're right, and I believe the attitude overrides the training. They just have poor attitudes. I'm looking at more and more and more videos. The worst thing ever happened to white supremacy and policing is social media, and the phone and the cell phone camera, and just thousands and thousands of videos out there of them just abusing the rights of Americans. We had people go to D.C., and I'll finish. Had people go to D.C. on January 6th arguing about an election, but they won't sit up here and go and argue about the first, fourth, fifth, 8th, 14th, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, 26th. They won't go argue about nothing else. There's a clear attack or a clear non-knowledge of policing with constitutional rights. And no, they're not going to know what my mother and sisters and what you all know, because they definitely going to do it. Tina Cosby thought they should know what. I love Tina, but one time she thought that the police should know what you all know. I said, Tina, how could they know in 6 months what my mother had to learn in 4 or 5 years, and then also 40 years, working in the courtroom? And they said, oh, I guess that makes sense. So they act like, I've seen them even stop attorneys. The district attorney in Jacksonville was pulled over for tent. The state's attorney, black, in Jacksonville was pulled over for tent, and the cops trying to argue to her the law. They think that they know more about the law than you all do. It's really a shame out there. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Well, what has happened though is that one of the critical aspects, of course, is the stop, motorists to stop. And when you see a lot of time people being stopped, particular minority, you see adverse result because a lot of time, in my mind, they're fabricating the results. But the other issue has to do, Milton, what I was surprised this week is the great actor Alex Baldwin was charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. And I just thought that was bizarre. You know, he's on a movie set and they supposed to have guns with blanks. And somehow they put live ammunition into a gun. He apparently pointed at somebody. And according to him, he never pulled the trigger. The gun goes off and killed this wonderful person who's on the production crew. And, you know, they've had lawsuits, they've had settlements, and now they have criminal charges. It's just an odd case to me in terms of being able to prove the criminal intent. I don't get it, Milton. How do you prove criminal intent in a case like that when obviously I've never known them to have live bullets on a movie set?
Well, my information is that he's charged with involuntary manslaughter, which I believe is a reckless, dangerous act where a human being can be harmed. I don't know if they're requiring intent to kill on his part, as opposed to he's negligent because he's given a gun and he didn't check the gun to see if it was loaded. I haven't read all the facts that they've discovered in their investigation and how much knowledge he had about this gun could be loaded when it was supposed to not have a live shell in it. So I don't know all those facts yet, Nate. But and I think I read yesterday he's charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. I thought it was only 1 person that was killed. Am I wrong?
Yeah, they're doing the movie Rust, and and what happened is that the film cinematographer was one that was killed.
It was killed.
And so I think that the 2 charges, I was looking at the charge the other day, and one charge is for involuntary manslaughter, but it seemed like they, in terms of 2 counts, they charged them for the same offense with a different burden of proof. And I had to pull up the actual charges. I didn't pull those out.
I haven't read the explanation for that. I'm just saying, based upon my experience in the law, you got 1 victim, you got 1 involuntary manslaughter. Whether they charged him with vol, I didn't read that. So I don't know how they could ever prove intent to kill on his part. It looks like negligence. I've done about 60 murder trials in my career and several death penalty trials. I am a little versed with the law out here in California as to intent, and an accidental killing of a person does not give you intent. It's just his behavior, his actions has to be scrutinized before you get to a homicide.
There are 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, which will be charged by the New Mexico District Attorney. Those charges will be filed by the end of the month.
Are they alternate charges, I guess?
Well, there are 2 against each defendant. The Alec Baldwin, the actor and producer, as well as the, I believe the director, but 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter against both, or at least against Alec Baldwin. Involuntary manslaughter in New Mexico, it's a 4th-degree felony, and it normally is punishable up to 18 months in prison and a $5,000 fine. But they've added, Milton and Nathaniel, a quote, firearm enhancement. which could make this involuntary manslaughter punishable by a mandatory sentence of 5 years in prison. So I don't know if that's unique to the New Mexico law, but that is how they've arrived at the 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter.
I still don't understand it. I'm sorry. Unless there are alternate theories, and seems to me you would just charge voluntary and involved, and hoping the prosecution is hoping that they would get the more serious offense, which would be voluntary. I'm sure that 5-year enhancement is because a firearm was used as opposed to a knife or a brick or something of that nature.
Right. It's a firearm enhancement.
Yeah.
And
so
go ahead, Attorney Grimes.
I'm just saying I'm a little confused by the two charges. That, to me, that implies 2 victims. So I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. I just haven't read it. That's 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah, I was reading it as we were talking, and 1 count is for involuntary manslaughter. Count 2, which they haven't filed yet, is for involuntary manslaughter with the use of a weapon. So It's the same charge. And they said the jury can decide which one is more appropriate. But here's my problem. I did some criminal cases back in the 80s. This is not a case I would ever lose. I just don't think that this should have ever risen to the criminal charge, because it's clearly an accidental shooting. And quite frankly, I've never heard of a movie set ever using live ammunition. I didn't know that that was even allowed. You know, I've not been around the movie industry, but a lot, but my limited exposure is that they use sound off guns or blinks and stuff like that, but never live bullets. In fact, the guns used to have a metal thing on the end that wouldn't even allow a bullet to be dispersed from the chamber.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate with you, Nathaniel Lee. You're a gun advocate or gun owner. You, I believe, would live by a rule: if you pick up a gun, you check it yourself to see whether or not it has a live round in it. You don't know what can happen to that gun once you take it out of a cabinet or take it out of whatever container you have it in and put it down and someone else put their hand on it. I thought that you were supposed to check that gun to see whether it had a live round in it, no matter where you are. That's just what I grew up thinking about guns. It's the same as if you have a gun and you're in a room with a couple of people, if that gun barrel happened to swing around to you, you're going to say, hey, check that gun, right? So I don't know if Mr. Baldwin is excused from checking the gun just because he's on a Hollywood set, Nathaniel. I mean, I could argue that when you handle a firearm, a deadly weapon, you're responsible for whether or not it has a live round in it. And if it's in your hand when it goes off, then you may have culpability in the result. Now, I understand he's saying he didn't pull the trigger. That may be something else. I've had a shotgun to go off with me once when I just set it down beside me and it went boom. I gave that shotgun to a friend of mine, told him what it did for me. Good luck. I don't want that very fun. That's a real story when I was in law school. So guns, you know, you gotta, if you're gonna have them, you gotta deal with the temperamentalness of it. That's all I get.
Well, here's the caveat. One of my favorite sports, not my favorite sport other than golf, is track and field. And in track and field, they start the races by firing the gun. The gun is blank, but the blank guns generally has something that within a metal compartment that doesn't even allow a bullet to escape the chamber. So from my standpoint, they use these blank guns in sporting events like track and field, right? And there's never been anybody that I'm aware of been shot with a gun in track and field. And so these guns, now in track and field, if you shot a real bullet up in the air, at some point in time, the bullet would come down and cause injury to somebody, right?
Good, yes.
So people rely on the fact that these are blank guns. So if I was trying the case, you know, when I'm doing voir dire, do you ever attend a track meet? I mean, just think about all the different areas you can talk about in the jury selection process. What type of gun they use? Did they fire it up in the air? Did you duck? In other words, when he shoots that blank gun, does everybody start ducking? No, they don't. Because people have been accustomed in our lifetime to dealing with blank gun. And that's why I had a problem with this, Milton, quite frankly. I just think that we've grown accustomed to blank guns all our lives. If we do athletics, we see these. And I think I was watching a swim meet, they were using a blank gun, in a swimming competition, track and field. And so why would you check to see whether or not a gun got a real bullet when you assume that it's a blank gun?
Because of cases where those blank guns have caused injuries and death. That's why.
Okay.
Well, then they weren't blank. And I guess my question is, from my perspective, the penultimate question is, how did live ammunition ever get on the set in the first place?
That's right.
And who has the responsibility, for the weapons? And it's my understanding that it's an individual professional called the armorer.
Mm-hmm.
And so is it reasonable that Alec Baldwin, the actor, should have foreseen that there might have been a live bullet in the gun? He said he never pulled the trigger. And of course, there's going to be a battle of the experts on that issue. The FBI, I believe, has issued a report stating that he had to have pulled the trigger for the gun to fire. But then, Milton, you raise a great point regarding the rifle story that you shared, which isn't a story, it's an actual situation. And we hear about guns going off accidentally, all the time that have live ammunition, and so it will be interesting to see what happens in this case. And by the way, the assistant director in the case has already taken a plea, and he took a plea on the charge of negligent
infliction
handling of a gun.
All right. Okay.
And it's anticipated that he will receive 6 months probation.
I think this is overkill. I don't think that the actor should ever have been considered, the charge should be considered against the actor in this case. I think this is, I think somebody is looking at the news media, and this is a case with a Milton Grimes type lawyer, he will be acquitted. I'm pretty confident of that, because I don't see how, because in all these movie sets, in all these years, these Cowboys movies, they use blank guns in all the movies. They don't use no real bullets, they're using blanks. And so even when you're pointing the gun at somebody, it's a blank. It's a harmless instrumentality unless somebody puts some projectiles in there that has some velocity. And what I mean is bullets that actually have a metal compartment that will cause injury or death. And that's what I'm concerned about. So I don't know. I think that Milton, that this is overcharging.
His lawyers believe the same.
I'm just giving forth my understanding of the burden of proof of the prosecution. They have a heavy burden of proof, but I don't know whether or not you can be relieved of your responsibility when you put a gun in your hand that could cause death and serious bodily injury, as this particular gun did cause.
I would file a motion limiting. I would file and say it's not a gun. Yeah. It's a blank. It's a blank. In other words, you're saying gun, but it's supposed to be a prop. It's a blank weapon. It's not supposed to be a loaded gun. So I'd be arguing that at the beginning. Don't call it a gun. It's a blank.
those blank guns, do they expel some hot air or something come out of the barrel?
Yes, when the trigger is pulled on with a real gun with live ammunition, the primer ignites the gunpowder and fires the bullet. But with blanks, they expel gunpowder and hot gases out of the front of the barrel in
Right.
kind of a cone shape,
Right.
but no bullet is fired.
Right. But if you are a foot away from the person and you do that with a blank gun, could it cause some harm to a person?
Well, the blank that I fired, I fired some, and I put it against a piece of cardboard, and it left some scratches and some discoloration, but it didn't go through the cardboard. So
if that had been human skin, it would have been some harm to it. Therefore, it reverts back to the responsibility that a person have for even a blank gun, because it could cause some minor injury or moderate injury to a human being. So
but they were more than 6 feet away.
Hmm?
They were more than 6 feet away. And so it wouldn't cause harm of a blank if you're 6 feet away.
Okay, you don't have to be careful if it's 6 feet away, but you got to be careful if it's 2 feet away.
But see, they weren't 2 feet away. They were like 6 feet or more away from it. That's why I was troubled by this whole thing. I'm thinking that with a blank, even you pointed at it, there's no velocity that will cause injury to the person in that distance. I don't know. Based on my own
Would your
personal
opinion
experience.
change, Attorney Lee, based on the fact that Alec Baldwin was also a producer of the movie as well? Did he have a greater responsibility as a producer?
Well, I think that they put together a budget to do a film, and then they talk about the props and things they need for the movie. And so that they buy everything. So, and nowhere I would bet in their budget, they say live ammunition. So as my defense would be, look at my budget. Nowhere did we ever tell any idiot to go out and buy live rounds of bullets for any prop. Nobody was told that. Nobody. So whoever sees, it's kind of complicated because once you unravel this, when you do these simple movies and stuff, I remember they did this movie when I was in law school at the University of Georgia. I was astonished to find out a simple scene that they have like 40, 50 different people there. So you have a lot of different people on these movie sets and having different levels of responsibility. So I like to see like their budget. And I start off with that. You're doing a defense of this case. We're in the budget to say buy live ammunition. It ain't gonna be there. So the producer, his defense would be, here's what we ordered. And I think that that's how it will start. If you're saying that I'm responsible because I'm a producer, but okay, I didn't order that. And that's why I'm troubled by it, quite frankly.
Great point, Attorney Lee. We are hearing that the armorer who's responsible for the weapons was, quote, inexperienced. And the New Mexico district attorney is stating that the facts show a total disregard for safety on the set of this Rust movie production.
Hadn't they had another incident with a gun on that set before this one?
I'm not aware.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying a person who has a dangerous weapon in their hand all times has the responsibility for that weapon to a degree. That's what the prosecution, I think, generally is arguing. Maybe not requiring everybody to search the gun for whether it's loaded or not, but I don't like no kind of gun, toy gun, cap gun, or nothing pointed at me. I'm serious.
Okay. Well, the next issue that's been dominated our news, there's not been a day that goes by that they're not talking about this rogue congressional person named George Santos out of New York. It was been one of the most intriguing political stories of our decade. We see that these politicians are getting more nuttier and nuttier. you know, I watch them on TV, and some of the things they do are unfathomable. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, with QAnon conspiracy. I watched some of the crazy stuff she was saying when they were talking about January 6th. She was saying, if I'd have been in church, you know, basically we'd have won because they'd have had real guns. I'm thinking, man, what a nutcase. And unfortunately, she's going to be over some committee in Congress, you know. But having said that, George Santos is one of the most fascinating case of a fabricated resume that I've ever seen. You know, his whole life seemed like his make-believe. I just could not believe it. Have you been following that?
I have been following that some, Nathaniel, but the man said, let's just put that behind us. I'm gonna do great things for this country, for my constituents. And so we all inflate our applications here and there and have degrees that we didn't earn, but I came close to earning that degree, or I'm interested in that. But the people trust me now to go ahead. I don't know if Trump, he didn't invent the big lie theory, but it sure has gotten stronger since his presidency that the truth doesn't matter anymore. The truth doesn't matter as much as it should, I should say that. And that's what Santos is using. He's been elected, so what's your argument, Nathaniel Lee?
Well, I talked to Attorney Banks first, get her input on this. I mean,
I'm just shocked that the US Congress introduced a bill to address fraud in the application to be a member for the US Senate or the US Congress. There's got to be a law against this.
Should be.
I was looking at a story about, because the 3rd District of New York, they ran a story about a high school class, students more heavily Republican than Democrat, but a mix. And they all concluded that he should step down immediately. And that if they lied on their applications to college and that was discovered, they'd be expelled from college immediately. And so I don't know if it's fascinating, Attorney Lee, but it's just deplorable that this George Santos has lied about every aspect of his life, including his own name. You know, I guess he could say that, you know, he has an avatar, you know, where he existed as, you know, a member of the Hannah Montana show that Miley Cyrus starred in years ago, and other personas that he has taken on, including being a drag queen. But he's lied about his education, where he worked, his religion, his family was members of the, you know, were devastated by the Holocaust, his finances, and all of these things. And I think that ultimately he'll be brought down by illegal campaign contributions. And of course, he's the subject of a Congressional Ethics Committee investigation as we speak.
you know, when I start looking at this story, I start thinking about different methods by which to correct this problem. For one thing, I assume that, like most politicians, he sends something through the mail. So whatever he sent through the mail, it contained false, materially false information. So I'm no criminal law expert in no terms, but I suspect that I didn't know why they didn't look at correspondence sent to the mail. It could be mail fraud or whatever. The second thing is you have a person who's writing bad checks and fabricated checks down in Brazil who report a very modest income a few years ago, now all of a sudden could donate a substantial amount of money to his campaign. Now we're talking about a relatively young person, all of a sudden come up with large sums of money. And so I suspect that they're going to look into that to determine the source of this money. Was it a valid campaign contribution that made it? Because we've seen a lot of politicians that get in a great deal of trouble by misuse of campaign fund. We've had a lot of famous people. We had the congressional person out in San Diego who got convicted of using campaign funds for private use. And then we saw the famous Justice Jackson Jr. He and his wife got in big trouble, got jail time for that. And I suspect that at some point in time, when they look at the finances and they go through actual records, that there's going to be something there. I suspect that. And because you can't just go out and create all this money overnight and not have a paper trail, And so I suspect that at some point in time, we will get the actual facts. But for now, it's political intrigue to have someone who is masquerading as person A and maybe person X. And when I looked at the various fraudulent activities, I guess a lot of people in political life may exaggerate things, but here's a person who, after I looked at the different allegation, we're not really sure what the heck his name is. And how did he become an American citizen? He's living in Brazil. This whole thing is goofy.
He's lied about every aspect of his professional and personal life. And again, I never would have thought that Congress would introduce the Santos Act, which stands for Stopping Another Non-Truthful Office Seeker, or the Santos Act, was introduced on January 15th. And I agree with you, Attorney Lee, that ultimately, I think that when you follow the campaign contribution trail, that will ultimately result in his demise. The question is, where did he get $700,000 to support his campaign?
It'll be fascinating. Attorney Grimes, though, as usual, one of the largest cities in the country, LA, they've been in the news every day. You have a homeless crisis out there, apparently in LA. Everybody liked the weather. They're trying to move out there, and a lot of people don't do as well because the housing prices out there are so ridiculously high. I've had clients move out there and they discovered that they couldn't pay their bills making $25 an hour. They couldn't get an apartment, to live in. And so you have a large, what are they doing about that problem out there? What's the latest? Have you been following that story in your city?
Yeah, the mayor has declared an emergency out here, and it is a homeless problem. I don't know if it's 60,000 or 100,000, but everywhere you look, not just in downtown LA, in the neighborhoods, there's little small encampments all over the county. You got a homeless problem in Orange County, San Diego, up in San Francisco. So there's just something wrong with the country with this amount of wealth not being able to take care of its veterans and people who have ended up not being able to provide themselves shelter. So she's going to grab it. She's grabbing it with different policies to build homes for the homeless. It's a crucial problem. That's all I can say. But let me just say something back on what you're talking about a lie. Santos didn't invent lying. for political gain. I mean, I think Trump mastered it, showed how it could be used extensively, and just say one thing one day and another thing the next day and ignore you when he's questioned about that. Herschel Walker, I don't know how he ever stayed in contention for his position with the lies that he came in there with. So this line is just part of our sickness now. Kids think it's nothing to lie because they see our politicians and our leaders lying about stuff. That's what we got in our society. A society where the truth doesn't matter as we thought it did before, you know? And I don't think you have to be old school to have that opinion. So anyway, that's how I feel about the lie and how our culture is changing. As to the homeless problem out here, Nate, man, it's serious. The police deal with them with the cruelty that you don't see because oftentimes it's not on video. But we got to just do something about it. That's all I can say. I don't know what you're doing in Indiana or Indianapolis or in Chicago, but it's serious out here. And I think you got a problem back there.
Well, here in our city, we have a number of shelters and for the homeless downtown. They in our developments in our city, they put a requirement that they include affordable housing in all of the developments that we're doing, the apartment complexes. They try to include a small percentage of the housing for people who can't afford to pay rent. Like, for example, downtown Indy, the condos are shockingly high, like $3,200 a month. Maybe that's not LA shockingly high, but Indy, that's really high. And but what they do is that they set aside like the Section 8 type housing or the federally subsidized housing, and they have to maintain so many units. And so they have to try to assimilate people who don't make a lot of money to also live in the same area. And it's a good program. And we do have homeless individuals here in Indy, but nothing like what you have in LA.
Because our homeless population is infused with people with mental illness. I've worked with the homeless lady on a pro bono case a couple of years ago. She was charged with a serious offense with $1 million bail. We got a bail reduced to $50,000. As part of the disposition, the judge agreed to order the social service to get her housing. They got her housing. It was a matter of less than a month when her friends overran the apartment. She was pushed back out into the streets. We got her another housing placement. She couldn't handle it because she had mental illness, because she was born a crack baby at 2 pounds and her mother put her out on the street as a prostitute at 11. So she was just born into a culture that she had no value in. And she wasn't mentally able. I mean, I got her one housing situation temporary with a lady that had 6 women in a house, and she would defecate in her roommate's bed when she got mad about the slightest thing. So a lot of our homeless people need medical care. They need mental health care. And so it's not just getting them a house. We got that problem of people need health care and psychiatric treatment. And some of them don't want to stay in a house. They don't want that confinement. So the problem is not just getting a shelter and sticking somebody in there. It's deeper than that, I think.
And one final comment, Attorney Banks.
I agree that we need holistic solutions, as Attorney Grimes just stated. And in LA County, African Americans, while make up 9% of the population, they account for 30% of the unhoused in LA County. And so there's a disproportionate impact that we see with respect to both African Americans and the Latino population, the number of homeless increased 25.8% as well. So it's a problem that we must fix. And I applaud Mayor Karen Bass for the first action after she was sworn into office was to declare homelessness a public health emergency in Los Angeles.
Well, thank you very much, our VIP guests. And I'd like to thank our audience. Next Saturday, we're going to have Ken Falk, who argued the Supreme Court this Thursday on the Indiana draconian abortion bill. And we're going to have him give us an update because I heard part of the argument, and it's probably going to be a model as to how to attack this in each state across the country. I've known Ken Falk for the last 30 plus years, and he only argued these constitutional cases. So we're going to have him on to talk about that case. I'd like to thank each and everyone and look forward to talking to you again next Saturday. Until then, God bless you and keep you. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care now.
Good night. Good
Have
day.
a great day.